If you could interview the captain of the Titanic, what would you want to ask him? Well, I think that's probably really easy, isn't it? If you could interview the captain of the Titanic, you would want to ask, what on earth went wrong here? And you'd ask, if you could have it to do over again, what would you do differently, right? I mean, what else could you possibly think to ask if you had a chance to interview the captain of the Titanic? What went wrong, and what would you do differently if you could do it over again? You know, that sort of scenario, that hypothetical that I just suggested to you, sort of illustrates a principle. And the principle is that we can learn in lots of ways, and one of the ways that we can learn is from mistakes and failures. And those mistakes and failures don't necessarily have to be our own mistakes and failures, so we have a lot of them, right? I think all of us would say, yeah, I've had my share of mistakes and failures. I should learn from them, but I can also learn from the mistakes and failures of others. In fact, if we don't learn, and if we can't take instruction from observing mistakes and failures, it's probably certain that we're going to end up repeating those things again and again. So tonight, we want to talk to a man who failed and see if we can learn some lessons from him. I want to suggest to you that there's some lessons that we can learn about parenting from a Bible character who was a miserable failure in this regard. And the man I have in mind is the man Eli. So I want to suggest some lessons from Eli about parenting. I hope we can talk about some things that will be helppful. Stop here just briefly to add words of welcome to those that have already been mentioned. We're glad that you're here in the middle of the night. You know, it seems like, with this time change, here we are, and it's just after 6 o'clock, and it's dead dark outside. But we're glad that you made the special effort to come out and be with us to worship again on this Lord's Day evening. Thanks to those who are visiting too. We're glad that you came our way. So, if Eli had a chance, if you could interview him, Eli, what went wrong? What would you do differently if you could parent again? One of the things that I think that Eli would want to do, and that we should want to do, is pay attention to the warning signs. It's really kind of stunning to consider the fact that in that Old Testament text, and we'll be looking at some passages from 1 Samuel here in just a minute, but Eli was a priest serving in the tabernacle. He himself, by all indications, was a God-fearing man. You might assume that since he was a priest and a God-fearing man, that he'd automatically raise godly children. But you know better than that, don't you? You know that raising godly children doesn't happen accidentally. Now, maybe Eli thought that it would. Maybe he just thought, because I fear God, because I serve as a priest, my sons will learn this and they'll automatically do the right thing. But raising children properly is not accidental. It doesn't happen by accident. I've heard of people who would say to a parent, "Oh, you've got good kids, you're lucky." No, it's not luck. It's not luck. If children turn out well, it's not luck. And you've got to pay close attention. And specifically, you need to pay attention to some of the warning signs that Eli apparently ignored. The immoral reputation of Eli's sons was well known, widely known among the Israelites. In 1 Samuel chapter 2, beginning verse 22, Eli was very old and heard all that his sons did unto all Israel, and how they lay with the women that assembled at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. And he said to them, "Why do you such things? For I hear of your evil dealings by all this people. Nay, my sons, for it is no good report that I hear. Ye make the Lord's people to transgress." Notice, I hear of your evil dealings. And so Eli was aware. The report about his sons was coming around because it was widely known. And yet he failed to do anything about it. Basically, he did nothing about the obvious problems that existed with his children. He ignored the warning signs. God even sent an unnamed prophet to warn Eli. In 1 Samuel chapter 2, beginning verse 27, there came a man of God unto Eli and said unto him, Thus saith the Lord, Wherefore kick ye at my sacrifice and at mine offering, which I have commanded. Now, the message that this prophet was delivering to Eli was, there's some issues that you need to straighten up. You need to get this matter under control, or God was going to do something to fix it. That's basically the message that this unnamed prophet gave to Eli. He was warned. There was warning signs, plenty of warning signs. In fact, you remember, now this wasn't the message from little Samuel. This was from an unnamed prophet. But even little Samuel received, messages from God to deliver to Eli about the problem with his sons. There were lots of warning signs, but Eli didn't do anything about them, and nothing changed. And so one of the lessons that I think we would want to learn from is pay attention. When you see issues, when you see problems, when you see these warning signs, you've got to react to that. As parents today, I think this is certainly good advice. When you see the warnings, pay attention, do something. Eli would like a chance to do that over, I'm sure. I hope that none of us will later say, boy, I wish when that had happened. I wish when that situation developed and I could tell it wasn't going well, I wish I had jumped on that with more ferocity. I wish that I had been more proactive. I wish I had done something when I saw the way that was headed. Pay attention to the warning signs. I think that is certainly a lesson that we need to learn from Eli. I would also suggest that we can learn from him that it's important to teach our children to respect authority. And when we talk about respecting authority, of course, where that starts is teaching our children to respect parental authority. In 1 Samuel chapter 2, verse 25, speaking about the sons of Eli, they hearkened not unto the voice of their father. They just didn't pay attention to what their father was saying. They hearkened not, suggests the idea they were just absolutely not obedient to the things that their father said. That's shameful, when you see a situation where a kid is acting out, disrespectful and disobedient. I heard of a situation where a boy struck his father, and people were outraged at the boy, rightfully so, for striking his father. But other people pointed out the father's it's a pretty shameful situation that the father allowed a situation to get to that point without teaching his son to respect authority. In Ephesians chapter 6, we know the familiar passage about parental duty. Ephesians chapter 6, beginning verse 1, Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor thy father and mother, which is the first commandment with promise, that it may be well with thee, and that thou mayest live long on the earth. And ye fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. So children are to, this doesn't happen just on its own. Children have to be taught to honor their father and mother. Failing to do that is just going to cause lots of trouble down the road. If by the time children become teenagers, which is a difficult time at best, if they can't or won't show respect for us as parents, then we have not done our jobs well. We should listen to Eli, and if Eli could talk to us, he'd say, here's an important thing to get done. Teach your children to respect authority. Beyond that, not just teaching them authority, but disciplining them when they disobey authority. If we don't discipline our children, and the Bible has a good bit to say about this. The book of Proverbs has several famous expressions in it. We're not going to look at those tonight. But the importance of disciplining our children is so critical. If we don't discipline our kids, we're failing them. If we don't discipline our kids, we're showing a lack of faith in the things that God says in His Word. If we don't discipline our children, we ourselves are being disobedient to God. It's so important to discipline your children. It's not a pleasant job. We'd rather not have to do that. We wish it just wouldn't be necessary. but I think everybody knows better than that. It is absolutely necessary. We're going to have to do that job. Notice how Eli dealt with this. Sometimes we talk about just a slap on the hand. I would argue that what we read here about Eli and how he spoke to his boys amounted to no more than just a slap on the hand when they deserved a lot more. In 1 Samuel 2, beginning verse 23, he said to them, "Why do ye such things? For I hear of your evil dealings by all this people. Nay, my sons, for it is no good report that I hear. You make the Lord's people to transgress. Notwithstanding, they hearken not unto his voice." He didn't do anything. He complained, he objected verbally, but he didn't do anything. And the fact of the matter is that the law of Moses had some instructions for disobedient children like this. Look in Deuteronomy chapter 21. In Deuteronomy 21, beginning at verse 18, it says, "If a man have a stubborn and rebellious son, which will not obey the voice of his father or the voice of his mother, and that when they have chastised them will not hearken unto them, then shall his father and his mother lay hold on him, bring him out to the elders of the city and unto the gate of his place. And they shall say to the elders of this city, This our son is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey our voice. He is a glutton and a drunkard. And all the men of the city shall stone him with stones, that he shall die. So shall ye put evil away from among you, and all Israel shall hear and fear." That's really what Eli should have been doing here, right? Eli should have been following that kind of severe treatment against his sons who were rebellious and disobedient. He didn't do it, and things just went from bad to worse. What about us? We've got to discipline our children, right? In the modern day, I think parents who properly discipline their children almost certainly will be accused of being too strict. You ever hear that? Oh, he's just too strict with his kids. I think if we're parenting the way the Bible suggests that we should parent, it's almost certain that we're going to be accused of being too strict. I know that some parents have expressed hesitancy to discipline their children out in public. I take my kids to the Walmart store and they show out in the Walmart store, but I'm afraid to say anything I'm afraid to do anything about it because people at the Walmart will think that I'm some kind of a child abuser if I discipline my children in public. I understand those worries. But the fact of the matter is, if we discipline the way the Bible tells us we should discipline, I'm convinced that most people in the modern world would say that's too strict. I think Eli would say, be strict. Be strict with them. Don't just give them a slap on the hand when they need a whole lot more discipline than that. This verse we're going to reference a couple of times, but in 1 Samuel 3, verse 13, God says, "I will judge Eli's house forever for the iniquity which he knoweth, because his sons made themselves vile, and he restrained them not." Notice, this iniquity, he knows. He knows what these boys are doing, and he restrained them not. He didn't do anything to stop them from all this misbehavior. He knew, but he didn't do anything. He didn't discipline in any measure at all. God held Eli responsible. We'll talk more about that at the end of the lesson. But notice, if Eli could discipline again, or if he could raise his children again, one of the things that he would want to do, and one of the things he would tell us to do, make sure that you administer proper child discipline. Certainly, one of the things we learn from Eli is it's essential, it's critical to teach your children to respect God. In 1 Samuel chapter 2 again, remember Eli was a priest and his sons were serving as priests. And so they were, I don't know, could you use the terminology? They were religiously active. His sons were religiously active, but they really had not been taught to love God. What the religious activity that they were engaged in served themselves, didn't serve God. They had not really been taught to love God. In this text, in 1 Samuel 2, verse 12, it says, the sons of Eli were sons of Belial. They knew not the Lord. Notice, that's kind of interesting. They were serving as priests, but it says they knew not the Lord. The priest's servant came and said to the man that sacrificed, give flesh to roast for the priest, for he will not have sodden flesh of thee, but raw. And if any man said unto him, let them not fail to burn the fat presently, and then take as much as thy soul desireth, then he would answer him, nay, but thou shalt give it me now, and if not, I will take it by force. Wherefore the sin of the young men was very great before the Lord, for men abhorred the offering of the Lord. Just a tiny bit of explanation here. You remember that the priest who served at the tabernacle, one of the ways that they were supported in the work that they did is that they were granted the privilege of taking certain parts of meat which was sacrificed, and they could take it for themselves and use it for their food. That's what this is talking about. But the sons of Eli were demanding, just give me the meat right up front. We don't go through this sacrifice process because I don't like the meat. He said, I don't want sodden flesh. I don't want meat that's been already dealt with, already used, already burnt in sacrifice or used in other ways in sacrifice. Just give me the raw meat. And if you don't, I'm just going to take it from you. That's how corrupt these men were. The sin of the young men was very great before the Lord, for men abhorred the offering of the Lord. This is not talking about it. So the sin of the young men was very great. That's talking about Eli's son, right? But because of their evil influence, then the men of Israel abhorred the offering of the Lord. The men of Israel basically said, what's the use? I mean, the priests over there at the tabernacle have corrupted this whole process. Why should we even bother? And so by their evil influence, they had turned others against God. What do you think, parents? Isn't there an inclination to think, well, listen, I'm a Christian, and my kids, by the way, they believe in God. They go to church. I take them to church. There might be some mistaken idea that is enough. I've even heard some parents who say, I'm not going to do too much biblical instruction with my kids, and when they get older, I'll let them decide for themselves. Of course, I don't know that there could be a more ridiculous position for a person to hold. We don't wait to teach our kids other things. I'm going to wait till my kids are older and let them decide if they want to learn how to add and subtract. I'm going to wait till my kids get older and let them decide whether they want to practice personal hygiene. We just don't do that, right? We know that we have to teach them at a young age. We don't wait for them to decide later. We've often referenced Timothy as a young Christian who was exemplary. In 2 Timothy chapter 3, 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 14, Paul says to Timothy, continue thou in the things which thou hast learned and hast been assured of, knowing of whom thou hast learned them, and that from a child thou hast known the Holy Scriptures, which are able to make thee wise unto salvation through faith which is in Christ Jesus. How was it that Timothy knew these things from when he was a child? That's because his mother and his grandmother had made the effort, taken the effort to teach him as he should be taught. And so, surely a lesson from Eli in regards to parenting would be teach them to respect God. Surely another lesson here is that children need to be taught in matters of basic morality. And again, this is a point of failure on Eli's part. So these lessons from Eli, they come from horrendous failure, just abject failure on the part of Eli. But we can learn from mistakes, right? We don't have to repeat those mistakes ourselves. Eli made the mistakes. We can learn from him. One of the things that Eli failed to do, that we see it and we should learn from it, is you've got to instruct your children in basic morality. In 1 Samuel 2, verse 22, Eli was very old and heard all that his sons did unto all Israel, how they lay with the women that assembled at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. I don't know about you, but I find that statement just absolutely shocking. Here's Eli, the priest. His sons are serving as priests, and they're committing sexual immorality with the women at the tabernacle. It's hard to imagine. We know that the pagan people that surrounded the Israelites engaged in that sort of thing. We know at their pagan temples they did that sort of thing. But God had called the Israelites to a much higher plane than that. And yet, apparently, Eli's sons were imitating the practice of the pagans around them. How could it be so? How could it be so that Eli the priest had not taught his sons to do better than that, to be better than that at a moral level, at a basic moral level? I'm going to tell you, I think, and I've told you this before, but I think parents in the modern day are more challenged in this regard potentially than any parents who've ever lived in the history of time. Now, parenting has always been hard. Eli would tell you it's hard to be a good parent. But we've got challenges. Parents today have got challenges that never existed before. You know, when we think about modern media, when we think about TV and the movies, when we especially think about the internet and how easy it is to access all sorts of immoral content, as parents, you're going to have to really be on your toes about this. This business of basic morality is really being challenged. You know, the new norms in our society are the norms of immorality. Immorality is the norm. That's the kids your kids are growing up with. That's the kids your kids are going to be around. That's what our media is constantly bombarding them with. All sorts of immorality. You're going to have to counter that. You're going to have to teach them basic morality. And if you fail to do that, especially if you fail to do that in the very formative years, when you have a chance to do it, you're going to regret this later. Eli would like a do-over on this. He would like to have taught his sons better, just on issues of basic morality, and we can learn. He didn't do it. He failed. We can learn from his mistake. I think a lesson that we could learn from Eli is that you need to show your kids that God is your top priority. And notice the emphasis here. You need to show your kids that God is your top priority. Now, we already set up here, we need to teach them respect for God. Hopefully we teach them to make God their top priority. But right here, show them that God is your top priority. Again, referencing Eli, 1 Samuel 2, verse 29. Wherefore kick ye at my sacrifice and mine offering, which I have commanded in my habitation, and honorest thy sons above me. Now, this statement is addressed to Eli. And to Eli, the question was, why do you kick at my sacrifice? You honor your sons above me. The fact that Eli allowed all of this to go on and didn't really make any concerted effort to put a stop to it was an indication to God. Remember, God's the one that's saying this. Eli was honoring his sons above God. Think about that for a minute. How is that so? Well, his failure to teach them what was right, and his willingness to let them continue in the bad course that they were following and refusing to adequately discipline them for the wrongs that they were committing. Why would he do that? Well, because he was putting them above God. His interest was more in what they wanted than what God wanted. Eli was honoring his sons more than God. Could that happen today? Oh, you better believe that could happen today. When parents encourage their children to be in activities, sports activities, recreational activities, even work activities that take them away from times of worship and Bible study. They should be here. They should be here at the assemblies. They should be here at Bible study. But they got a ball game. They got this school activity. Their friends are going somewhere, and they want to go with them. And you know, I really want my kids to fit in. You know, I want them to be popular with their peers. I don't want them to stick out. I don't want them to be different. When parents think that way, you know what they're saying? They're saying, to your children, you're saying, God can be number two. Right now, for tonight, the ball game is more important than God. For right now, the school activity is more important than serving God. You're teaching your kids that God can be number two. And God always demands to be number one, right? And so Eli really failed in that. We can learn from that. You will not be sorry. I guarantee you will not be sorry if you conscientiously and consciously show them that God is your top priority. Right? Set that example for them. Let them see you make some sacrifices about things that you'd like to be doing, but you know that contradicts or conflicts with something you need to be doing for God. Show them that, and you will not be sorry. Eli, his failure, I think, emphasizes that point to us. Okay, final observation. We've already touched on this. The final observation is right here. God held Eli accountable. Eli failed as a parent, right? So his sons, are they going to be punished? Is God's wrath going to come upon the sons of Eli? Absolutely. Of course it is. But not just on the sons, but also on the father who failed to do the job that God expected him to do. One more time, 1 Samuel 3, verse 12. I will perform against Eli all things which I have spoken concerning his house. When I begin, I will also make an end. For I have told him that I will judge his house forever for the iniquity which he knoweth, because his sons made themselves vile, and he restrained them not. I don't think that's the King James rendering there, but it's pretty plain, isn't it? That God was going to hold Eli accountable because he had failed his job as a parent. Now, having said all of that, we should obviously make the point that our children themselves are free moral agents, you know, and so it may be the case that a parent does the very best job they could possibly do, and yet still their children or a child grows up to turn against God. That may happen. Unfortunately, sometimes that does happen. And every person is a free moral agent, and every person is personally accountable before God. But may it never be so that our children turn against God because we failed to do the awesome job that is assigned to parents. Eli would love to be able to do this over. I'm sure if Eli could speak to us from the grave, and if we ask him the question, like the captain of the Titanic, Captain Titanic, this is a horrendous failure. Eli, his story is a horrendous failure. What's your questions to Eli? What went wrong? What would you do differently if you could do it over again? I think Eli would have some answers to that if he could speak to us from the grave. Hope the lesson's been helpful and encouraging. I do think the job of parenting is just an amazingly awesome responsibility. It's an incredible job. It's a very difficult job. I think in the modern world it gets harder and harder for parents. But you wanted the kids. You wanted to have children. You got children. Now raise them. Now do the work. Do the job. It's what you wanted. It's what you signed on for. You got to do the job. Thanks for listening. Hope it's helpful. We're going to sing a song of invitation. As we sing this song, we'll be asking everybody, think about your relationship with God. Make sure it's right. If you're not a Christian yet, that simple plan that we always recite is hear, believe, repent, confess, and be baptized for the remission of sins. For those who have already named the name of Christ and become Christians, it's still possible that you can fall away and not be faithful. Come back to Him in repentance, confession, and prayer. If we can help in any way, let us know while we stand and sing.